Welcome to this week's edition of Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Chi-Chen Lo. In August this year, China will be getting all the media attention for hosting the Summer Olympic Games in Beijing. And for leaders in China, it will be a good opportunity for leaders and for Chinese leaders to show to the world that China has become a great power and a so-called responsible stakeholder. But on the other hand, for the rest of the world, it's also very important for us to see China will behave with the rise of its power. So how do you see the future behavior of China? In today's program, we are very delighted and honored to invite Professor John Garver to come to our program. And Professor Garver is a well-known international China expert, and he has published numerously on China's foreign policy. Professor Garver, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much.
And as we can see that China seems to be more responsive this time in the wake of the earthquake to the international help. How do you see China's behavior?
I think they responded very well, especially the juxtaposition between their openness and the closed response of Myanmar. It's hard to say whether this is because of the Olympics, and I'm sure that the Olympics helped condition their openness, but I think they've won a great amount of sympathy and respect for the swiftness and effectiveness with which the government has responded to the disaster situation. It's interesting to me how quickly the criticism over Tibet, over the repression of the demonstrations in Tibet, dissipated with the handling of the catastrophe, the natural catastrophes. So I think they won a great deal of respect and handled it very astutely.
But do you think
most fundamentally, of course, is the response alleviated the suffering of many people in Sichuan province.
But do you think the criticism on China's behavior in Tibet disappear already, or do you think that will surface again when the Olympic game comes?
Good question, very good question. I think I was referring basically to the media's attention. I mean that those demonstrations, the events in Tibet, and then the protest surrounding the torch parade through the different cities, that dissipated very quickly. But of course, the underlying question is still there. Beijing's relation to Tibet and the Tibetan people's, desire for greater autonomy and so forth. And I think you're right. That probably will come up again during the Olympics because the pro-Tibet movements around the world, not only in Dharamsala and the Dalai Lama's people, they're very astute. They understand the way the media works, and they understand that this is a great opportunity for them, perhaps an unparalleled opportunity to push the issues. So I think it will come back.
But do you think that also reflects the leadership change in China as well? How the new leaders react to the media attention, especially international media?
I guess I'd have to say no to that. I think that the degree of strictness versus relaxedness that depends upon very much on the circumstances. And with the Olympics coming up, they want to do everything possible to impress the world. But if this I don't think it connotes any underlying change. As I take it, the desire for stability and the fear of instability in various manifestations is so powerful in Beijing that control over media and control over the news is still very, very important to Beijing. And you can a bit more lax in certain circumstances, a bit tighter in others, but the basic trend, I don't think we're talking about a fundamental change.
One of the key fundamentals of the China's policy, domestic policy, is the so-called harmonious society. In other words, they have very concerns about the so-called instability in China. Do you think that this kind of unrest or instability in China is getting worse or has been improved?
Well, I think it's probably getting worse. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of anger in China for all sorts of different reasons, from corruption to confiscation of property by local officials for real estate developments, for environmental issues, ethnic, religious issues. A tremendous amount of tension. And if you look at China's history, both from 1989 to the overthrow of the Qing dynasty through the Republic of China in 1948-49, and then you look at the USSR and Eastern Europe, there's a lot of things that suggest that this anger could come together in a way which would create real instability. How's it going to come out? I don't know. I don't think even the leaders in Beijing, who have the best intelligence, I don't think they could answer that. But it is stability, instability is a real concern. There's a lot of dynamite, social dynamite in China.
But it's noted by many people that the theme of this year's Summer Olympic Games is so-called harmonious world. In other words, China also hoping that there could be a good neighbors, good peaceful environments surrounding China. What's the key motives for China's this kind of policy?
I think because there's so much disharmony in China that this incredibly rapid development has created all sorts of environmental and urban problems, so on and so forth. That the East Coast has gotten rich very quickly, the interior much more slowly, levels of inequality within regions have increased. Very few methods for people to express their grievances other than taking to the streets. So I think, frankly, one of the reasons for the slogan "harmonious society" is there's so much disharmony in China's society. But I'm not saying that it's entirely cynical. I don't think it is cynical, but it's an attempt to address the grievances, the accumulated grievances within Chinese society. Of course, the other way to look at it, another factor is that for the first 20 years of reform, opening reform, the East Coast came first, and Deng said it's some people get rich before others.
That's right.
And about 99, 2000, there was a policy decision, strategic decision made to finally start shifting resources to the interior and develop it. And again, Hu Jintao has made his career in the poorer regions of China. So. I think it's, in other levels, an attempt to address these egregious regional disparities which have emerged in the course of China's historically rapid development.
But on the diplomatic front, China seems to be very successful in implementing the so-called good neighboring policy. As you can see, that Hu Jintao just visited Japan, and the results tend to be quite okay for China, especially for Japan. How do you see the trip?
Well, the good neighbor policy, I think arose in the mid-90s out of a recognition by China's leaders that the countries around it were apprehensive about China's future trajectory and whether China would use this greater power to in assertive and aggressive ways. And I think it was an attempt to, and is an attempt to reassure them. And that's great. That's great. I think that probably China's diplomacy now is about as responsible as we could hope for with a rising power. To my mind, the problem isn't now; it's what might come in the future, and there's no way of knowing. But I think that China is playing a pretty responsible role in the countries and the regions around it, in Korea and in Afghanistan,
including with its relationship with Russia as well, I guess.
Right, yeah.
But do you think that China has been successful in alleviating some of the concerns among those neighboring countries?
I think they have. I think there's been a remarkable shift in the opinion of, say, the Southeast Asian countries in the last 10 years. Up through the mid-90s, through the mischief reef confrontation with the Philippines in '95, I think there was real trepidation among the Southeast Asian countries that China would throw its weight around. But that has changed very quickly, I think, and now there's a sense that China's economic development is an opportunity and an attempt to turn that to local advantage. Of course, there's another level here too, that this good neighbor diplomacy is a type of hedging against the United States.
That's right.
On the one hand, it's trying to legitimately reassure the neighbors, but you want to reassure the neighbors so that they don't drift into alignment with the United States or any other power which might have nefarious purposes. So it's a type of hedging against the United States. Regarding Japan, you mentioned Japan before. I think the recent exchange did go well, but I'd say it's about time. And the utilization of anti-Japanese nationalism in China. To target Japan, in part for purposes of domestic legitimization, and had a real impact within Japan. And I think that one of the main things pushing Japan towards playing a greater military power is apprehension about China, which are due in large part to China's own actions. So now I think that China is trying to rebuild that relationship, and that's good. I don't think it's an American interest or the interest of other countries in the region that this tension between Japan and China escalate.
But do you think it's a divide and defeat or divide and conquer strategy on the part of China in trying to divide the regional allies with the United States?
I don't think so. I think that probably that there are different views on this in Beijing, and there are some people that say that China should work to end the Japanese-U.S. alliance and to push American military bases out of Japan and maybe even push the United States out of the Western Pacific. There is that point of view, and I think that's probably especially strong in the PLA. But there's another point of view, and maybe it's more dominant, certainly dominant in the military, that first of all, if China pursues that route, it's going to push those countries which are apprehensive of China closer to the United States. Secondly, if the United States, if you dissolve the Japan-U.S. alliance, one option for Japan is unarmed neutrality. But if you look at history in the region of the world, that's not very likely. What's more likely would be armed Japanese self-reliance. And so if Japan was responsible for its own military security, national security, it would need long-range missiles and bombers and aircraft carriers and probably even nuclear weapons. So, from Beijing's perspective, maybe a good way of of limiting the growth of Japanese military power is to keep Japan hitched to the United States. So I think you have these two different views, and my sense is that the latter view is dominant within the Chinese establishment.
But how about the idea or the nightmare of so-called China threat? Do you think the China threat idea is still there, or people, think that's a ridiculous idea?
Well, look. First of all, I think that in China there's a tendency to use the China threat as a club to beat people who voice any criticism of China. So if you're at a conference, you're at an interview like this in China, and you mentioned that Japan might be scared of, might be afraid of these, week-long, strident anti-Japanese demonstrations, and therefore want a little more security. Well, you're accused of, advocating the China threat, and it's a very effective tactic. I mean, it's because if you charge somebody, promulgating the China threat, well, the natural response is, well, no, I'm not doing that, and they proceed to, to prove that you're wrong. But on the other hand, look, China is a big country with an incredibly rapid development trajectory. Very probably, China will have a gross domestic product exceeding that of the United States in another 15 or so years, 15, 20 years, almost certainly. If you say that, in 15 years, the China mainland will have a standard of living maybe like Hong Kong today, or like Taiwan, today, or maybe 10 years ago. Well, you extrapolate it from that, and you said that, well, China's GDP will be several times that of the United States. And the emergence of powers of this type in this way is historically very unsettling to other countries. So, yes, if you talk to Vietnamese or Indians or some Russians, they're concerned about what might happen. Again, I don't think that the real concern is with China's trajectory now or policy now, but what might be China's policy in 20 years when it has achieved its objective of achieving a mid-range prosperity.
And apparently, the most important bilateral relationship in the region actually is the U.S.-China relationship. So when we come back, we'll talk about how the U.S. sees the rise of China and how does the U.S. manage this bilateral relationship. So don't go away. We'll be back after this message.